Of course, my friend and colleague Jim Sciutto right there in Hanoi this morning, the site of a surprise collapse of the president's second summit with North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un. We will dig into that in a moment, but right now we are just moments away from the third and final day of Michael Cohen's test of endurance on Capitol Hill. President Trump's former lawyer and confidant is appearing behind closed doors before the House Intelligence Committee, fresh off an explosive public session yesterday before House Oversight. Jim.
Well, good morning. Good to be with you, Poppy. Good to see all of you here from Hanoi. As you might imagine, the president had some thoughts on the Cohen hearing, even half a world away here in Vietnam. But the big story here comes down to two little but important words: no deal.
You always have to be prepared to walk. I could have signed an agreement today, and then you people would have said, oh, what a terrible deal, what a terrible thing he did. No, you have to be prepared to walk.
CNN has now learned that the president's aides had warned him in advance that the North Koreans were insisting on full sanctions relief and not willing to budge. Still, we're told that he thought he might, face-to-face with Kim, be able to work something out. Poppy.
That's right. Let's listen.
They wanted the sanctions lifted in their entirety, and we couldn't do that. They were willing to denuke a large portion of the areas that we wanted, but we couldn't give up all of the sanctions for that. So we continue to work, and we'll see, but we had to walk away from that particular suggestion. We had to walk away from that.
This is the key, Poppy. So this is the second time that this president flew to the other side of the world to meet face-to-face with the North Korean leader. And the second time that he left that summit without significant progress on denuclearization. Right. Now, it is good that the two sides are talking. We remember where we were more than a year ago with genuine fears of military escalation. That said, it is unclear what the path forward is here, because as the president showed there, North Korea sticking to a maximalist position. That is, all sanctions must be lifted. That's a distance that the president was not willing to go. So the question is, what is going to bring North Korea back from that position, and what is the U.S. prepared to offer in return? The president said there is no third summit set. Secretary Mike Pompeo said there are no talks scheduled at a working level, at least yet. He didn't say they're going to stop talking, but he said there are no new talks scheduled. So the real question is, the president imagined that with the force of personality, with the power of this personal relationship that he struck with Kim Jong-un, that would be able to move the dial, despite the warnings he got from his senior aides. But it was not able to move the dial for a second time.
And Jim, on that front, I mean, we're learning a lot more this morning about how the president was advised by his key advisors, like John Bolton, heading into this summit, right? And how that shaped him eventually walking away from the table here. What have you learned?
That's right. He was told, apparently, by his national security advisor, John Bolton, but also the special representative from North Korea, Stephen Biegun, that in the days leading up to these talks, that North Korea was not budging on these issues, particularly on sanctions, and that he was warned not to give in too much to them, right? They were conscious of that. The president felt that he might be able to push North Korea, get Kim to move more than North Korean negotiators had prior to this summit. And the president was disappointed that Kim was not willing to do that in those face-to-face meetings. So the president then made the decision to, as he said, walk away. He called it a friendly walk away at his press conference earlier this morning, Poppy, here. Yeah. But it was a walk away, and that's significant. Now, I should say, and credit where credit is due, because leading up to this, you and I spoke about this repeatedly, there was concern even from inside his own administration that he might give up too much, but the president holding the line here.
No, that's exactly right. That's exactly right, Jim. Look, also really significant, and something I think we both don't want to get lost in this conversation of the headlines out of Hanoi, is the fact that yet again, Jim, the president took the denial of an autocratic leader at face value about the death and the condition of Otto Warmbier, the American citizen detained in North Korea, who came back under the Trump presidency. Now he is taking Kim Jong-un's word about what he knew about his condition. Shocking.
It's right. It really was the most breathtaking moment from that press conference. A young American goes to North Korea, is taken hostage by North Korea, and he's sent home brain dead, and he dies at home. And the president taking the word of a brutal dictator who repeatedly has killed dissidents at home and abroad, that he didn't know about it. And this fits a pattern. The president took Putin's word over the intelligence communities on interference in the election. He took Mohammed bin Salman's word, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, over the U.S. intelligence community's assessment that he knew of the murder of the journalist Jamal Khashoggi. And now he's taking Kim Jong-un's word. Listen to how the president said it earlier this morning.
He felt badly about it. I did speak to him. He felt very badly. He knew the case very well, but he knew it later. And, you know, you got a lot of people, a big country, a lot of people. And in those prisons and those camps, you have a lot of people. And some really bad things happened to Otto. Some really, really bad things.
Why are you?
But he tells me that he didn't know about it, and I will take him at his word.
Yeah. It was really a Helsinki-like moment, Poppy.
Yeah.
Similar to that moment that was heart-stopping in Helsinki when he took Putin's word, and here you have him saying again, I take him at his word. A remarkable thing for an American president to say, given what we know about the North Korean dictator.
Yeah, I wonder what Otto Warmbier's parents are thinking hearing that. Jim, okay, stand by, because also new this morning, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says no date set for even a potential future third summit between the president and Kim Jong-un. He said both sides need to, quote, take a little time to regroup. Michelle Kaczynski is also with us from Hanoi. And I think that's really telling, Michelle, because it was just this past weekend when Pompeo said they were open to a third summit.
Right. I mean, it's not surprising that they need to take a little time, considering how frustrating this has to be for this administration at this time, to have had this entire thing set up, to have had on the White House's public schedule a signing ceremony for today, and then there be absolutely nothing to sign, nothing to agree on. So clearly they need to regroup and do this. So we just heard from Secretary of State Pompeo again. He said a few things during the press conference with President Trump, but on his plane now headed to the Philippines, he spoke to reporters on the record. He seemed to be in a bad mood, several times berating the reporters for asking the questions that they did, trying to get more detail. And what he wants to do is emphasize that there was progress made, but he does not want to give really any detail about that progress. So in the things that the Secretary of State just said about what was good coming out of this summit, he's quite cryptic. He says you should not assume that we didn't come to agreement on a whole number of issues. He says we'll go back and work on these, but we've moved forward and have a shared set of understandings. And then, of course, during the press conference, he said the progress that they've made over the last 2 days put us in position to get a really good outcome. What exactly that means and when that good outcome is going to happen, it doesn't seem like they know themselves at this point, Poppy.
Michelle, thank you very
Michelle
much.
Kaczynski, thanks very much. I'm joined here now in Hanoi by former Pentagon press secretary, former State Department spokesman, and retired Rear Admiral John Kirby. Admiral, great to have you on.
Thanks, Jim.
So as we said, credit where credit is due.
Yep.
You know, there was concern that the president might give too much from his own advisors, held the line. That said, this is the second time a U.S. president has traveled halfway around the world to meet face-to-face, and the president had the expectation that that personal relationship and his art-of-the-deal skills could move the dial. They did not. Is this a failure for this president?
I don't know that I chalk it up as a failure, but look, I mean, he's dealing with an autocratic tyrant and who doesn't empower anybody below him. So I can understand why the president was willing to sort of re-energize the process, which had been moribund after Singapore, by coming back out here. Now I don't believe a third summit with Kim Jong-un really is in order anytime soon. I think Pompeo's right. You got to get the teams back there. You got to start making some kind of meaningful progress on some sort of a plan to go forward before they have yet another meeting.
Mm-hmm. And it's notable that not only is a third summit not scheduled at the top level, but Secretary Pompeo said on the plane on the way out of here that they have not even scheduled the working level conversations. He said they will have them, and they hope to have them, but they haven't scheduled them yet. How do you bridge this distance now? Because with the president's comments there that the North Koreans were demanding a full lifting of the sanctions, that is quite a demand, offering only to dismantle one of many nuclear facilities. How do you bridge what is a significant gap then between those two sides?
It's a huge gap. I mean, it just shows you how intractable this problem is going to be. So what I think they're probably going to go back to now is whatever progress Pompeo alluded to, start from that perspective, and then try to build out a framework for just mid-level talks going forward and look for low-hanging fruit. Like maybe it is the liaison office. Maybe it is an end-of-war declaration. Something small that you can start to hang on to and build a little bit of confidence on both sides. Because, look, they are so far apart. Now you have to start just chipping away at that trust. Remember, Jim, this is a country that we've only just recently really started to talk to directly. Yeah. There's no basis for trust between the North Koreans and the United States, and so they got to start just finding small ways to build that trust.
The Otto Warmbier moment there, this president saying he takes Kim at his word, as he has taken Putin at his word, as he has taken Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia at his word, folks whose word you should not be taking in light of what we know about him and the U.S. intelligence community has assessed.
Right.
How shocking a moment is that for an American president, speaking about the death of a young American?
Yeah, it kind of took my breath away to listen to that. I mean, and I can't but imagine what it must have been like for the Mr. Warmbier's parents and the family to hear him say that. It's inexplicable. I don't know why he would just take Kim Jong-un's word. Look, I mean, it's possible that Kim didn't know at the moment Warmbier was arrested and was put into detention. But clearly, when he appeared on TV, international TV, when he was charged, you got to assume that Kim Jong-un knew what was going on. And they don't make many decisions in North Korea without Kim Jong-un's awareness and just tacit approval. So it's a strange credulity, and I think it was a real low moment of the press conference today.
Yeah, remarkable one. John Kirby, thanks very much. And Poppy, it was quite a night of news here, and we're going to be dealing with the repercussions of this for some time.
I have to say, Jim, I was surprised when I woke up this morning and saw all those headlines that this had fallen apart so quickly, and then the press conference, moved up by 2 hours, et cetera. That was certainly surprising and has really significant consequences. Thank you. Of course, you're going to be with me throughout these 2 hours. They're live in Hanoi. Also, one day after that explosive public testimony, Michael Cohen is back on the Hill for a third day of questions. He just arrived. There you see him, day 3 moments ago. What are lawmakers hoping to learn today behind closed doors? We'll take you to Capitol Hill.
Welcome back. Just moments from now, Michael Cohen will kick off his third day of testimony on Capitol Hill, this after an explosive 9-hour public hearing on Wednesday.
In that hearing, Cohen called his former boss, now the president, quote, a racist, a con man, and a cheat. Well, today, what he says will be behind closed doors in private. Our Manu Raju is live on Capitol Hill. I think the big question, Manu, now is, A, how will today be different from yesterday, other than the fact that we won't see it? And B, where does Congress go from here with Michael Cohen?
Well, I talked to Adam Schiff, the House Intelligence Committee chairman, just about that. And he says he wants to drill down much further on a number of the topics that did come up yesterday. He believes there's much more that they need to ask him. Specifically, they want to look into whether there was any White House role in editing or involvement in those false statements that were made to this very committee back in 2017 when Michael Cohen at the time downplayed rather significantly the Trump organization's pursuit of that Trump Tower Moscow project back in the campaign season of 2016. Of course, he later pleaded guilty to lying to Congress and suggested that there was a more extensive involvement in yesterday's testimony. He also said that the president was more heavily involved, and he said that White House attorneys had edited, attorneys to the president had edited those false statements. Now, this is something that the attorney, Jay Sekulow, for the president has denied, but that's something they want to push much further. Schiff also told me they're going to try to figure out any more to corroborate some of those claims that Michael Cohen made, and expect a lot of questions about what Cohen said yesterday about Roger Stone, the Trump associate, telling the president about his outreach to WikiLeaks. That was something that came up, of course, yesterday, but more questions expected about that today. So we'll see if they learn anything new, but Madam Schiff believes that's going to be a big focus of today's hearing behind closed doors. Jim and Poppy.
All right, Manu, you'll be all over it. Thank you very much. Let's bring in CNN legal analysts Ann Milgram and Ross Garber. Good morning to you guys. And Ann, let me just ask you, in terms of, the lack of the use of the word impeachment yesterday by Democrats on the Oversight Committee was striking. And after, though, we heard from, for example, Congresswoman Jackie Speier, Democrat of California, saying that when she was asked if the president should be impeached, she said, quote, "There's growing evidence that an impeachment pleading can be made, but I think that needs to be evaluated." Did you hear anything from Michael Cohen yesterday that makes you think that impeachment proceedings are now more on the table than they were 36 hours ago?
So I think what Michael Cohen did was he gave us some additional information that's incredibly relevant to things that we knew and some new information. The one place where I think he gave more testimony yesterday than we've heard before relates to the payments to Stormy Daniels. The showing of a personal check that was written to him by the President of the United States to cover that up. That's a campaign finance violation. I think we knew it already from the Southern District pleadings, but to actually hear Michael Cohen talk about it and then show that one of the checks that the president had given him to pay him back for that contribution that Cohen had made to Stormy Daniels, I think is significant. But that's still a question of, will the House move forward on impeachment for something that happened largely prior to the time that Donald Trump became president? And we can talk about it, but there are some other places where I think Cohen's testimony actually may be more impactful going forward, talking about Donald Trump Jr., Roger Stone's conversation, taxes, potentially tax evasion. I mean, those are, I think, the really interesting things that came out yesterday.
Yeah. Ross, to that point, the president claimed in his press conference overnight that Michael Cohen exonerated him on collusion with Russia. Not quite clear what he was basing that on, but fact is, and I think Ann was referring to this, on the Russia piece of this investigation, Michael Cohen in fact said that the president had advanced knowledge via Roger Stone of the WikiLeaks releases, and that he had advance notice of the June 2016 Trump Tower meeting, a heads up from his son Donald Trump Jr., something the president has repeatedly denied. If those two claims are true, that's an if the special counsel has something to corroborate that, how significant in the broader Russia investigation?
Those could both be very significant, but I think the big issue is that if. I watched the president's comments and I almost felt sort of a sigh of relief. I mean, you think about how close Michael Cohen has been to Donald Trump, to his family, to his businesses, and for how long. It almost felt like the president was relieved that it wasn't worse yesterday than it actually was. And in reality, we didn't learn a ton new yesterday. We learned a lot more details, and there were a lot more threads about things that we already knew. But in terms of the Russia collusion angle, I think the president actually has a point that Michael Cohen really didn't do much to further that narrative.
Not that narrative, Ross. It's an important point.
Exactly.
However, let's just, but there's something else. Let's all listen to this exchange. It's between Illinois Congressman Raja Krishnamurti and Michael Cohen yesterday talking about the SDNY. Let's roll it.
Is there any other wrongdoing or illegal act that you are aware of regarding Donald Trump that we haven't yet discussed today?
Yes, and again, those are part of the investigation that's currently being looked at by the Southern District of New York.
And, I mean, a lot of the coverage this morning is pointing to that as potentially being the most damning for the president, despite the no collusion statement by Michael Cohen. So what else could the SDNY have?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I think probably the most significant thing Cohen said yesterday is this thing he didn't say, where he said, I can't talk about it because there's a pending investigation. And I think it becomes really interesting when we think about the fact the president is still under investigation for obstruction of justice. At the beginning, when he fired Jim Comey, it's very interesting of what, if anything, Cohen knew at that time, and any other actions by the president, whether it relates to Russia or to other things. Michael Cohen left open, he basically said, I know of other crimes, but I can't talk about them because they're being investigated. That does not mean that the Southern District of New York charges the president or anybody else, but it certainly provides information to us that the investigation in the Southern District is still going strong and that there's more potentially to come.
Ross, finally, and this is something we'd heard something about before, but Michael Cohen reiterating that conversations about a Trump Tower project in Moscow continued far longer than the president had previously acknowledged, well into June, after the president was the Republican nominee. It was clear he's going to be the Republican nominee. From a legal standpoint, I mean, there are political implications to that, but from a legal standpoint, anything wrong with a candidate to the presidency of the United States continuing discussions with a hostile foreign power about a lucrative business project during the campaign?
When you put it like that, look, it does not sound good. And I think you and Ann actually hit on, I think, the big potential vulnerabilities and issues right now. One is what was happening with that deal. There are so many questions that we just don't know the answers to. And that's an issue that I think we're going to learn more about. That's one. Two, though, is the Southern District investigation of the president and his businesses. We just don't know where that's going to go or when. And I'm going to add a third one that I think is really a ticking time bomb, and that is the obstruction issue. There's a lot that we don't know about. We know that the special counsel has done a lot of investigating, has interviewed a lot of White House staff, including the counsel, the White House counsel. That is a potentially explosive area for the president.
It's a lot of lines of inquiry. Ross Gerber,
Sure.
Ann Milgram, thanks very much. We're going to stay on top of it. President Trump flying home from Hanoi empty-handed after his second face-to-face summit with the North Korean leader, Kim Jong-un. Was it all worth it? And what's the next move for the Trump administration?
We're also moments away from the opening bell here on Wall Street. Some really strong fourth quarter numbers in terms of economic growth, 2.6%. We're going to watch how the markets respond in just moments.
Well, it is happening again today. Day 3 in a row of Cohen testimony now underway on the Hill.
And it was quite an ugly day of partisan bickering in front of the House Oversight Committee on Wednesday. Were there any political winners here? Really, with us, national political correspondent for the New York Times, Alex Burns, and White House reporter for the Washington Post, Tolu Olorunnipa. Good morning to you both. Let's just take a moment and listen to the president weighing in on this and something he actually liked from Michael Cohen. Here he was.
He lied a lot, but it was very interesting because he didn't lie about one thing. He said no collusion with the Russian hoax. And I said, I wonder why he didn't just lie about that too, like he did about everything else.
So Tolu, he's a liar when he is, and when he's not, he's telling the truth?
Well, the president does seem obsessed with the Russia answer that Michael Cohen gave, even though so many of the other answers that Michael Cohen gave directly implicated the president in a number of different criminal acts. Even though Michael Cohen said that he could not say for sure that that President Trump was colluding with the Russians during the campaign, he said that he believed that President Trump would have done anything to win, and he dropped some circumstantial evidence that may have implicated the president in potential crimes during the campaign. So even though the President Trump seemed to be happy with what Michael Cohen said about Russia, he's not going to be happy with the months of investigation that Democrats are going to be able to pursue because of what Michael Cohen said, not only about the president's taxes, but his campaign finance violation allegations, as well as self-dealing with his charity, bank fraud, tax fraud. There are a number of different avenues of investigation that Democrats are going to be able to pull on. So even if there's no collusion allegation, the other allegations are enough to give the president a world of hurt for the next several months.
Alex Burns, I think folks at home after days like this will want to know the basic answer to the question, what's different now? What has changed? And prior to Cohen's testimony, Democrats have told me in private that they would need a significant revelation to make the possibility of impeachment credible. But you did hear some Democrats, Jackie Speier among them, say there's a growing evidence that an impeachment pleading can be made. I wonder, in your conversations with Democratic lawmakers, did Wednesday move the dial for them?
I don't know, Jim, that it revealed facts on its own that sort of shocked them into thinking that an impeachment fight is the right choice right now. I do think that talking to Democrats and frankly some Republicans as well who are certainly not enthusiastic about impeaching the president, it's becoming easier for them just to, on a mental level and even an emotional level, imagine the set of circumstances that would actually lead them to pursue impeachment. What I mean is that, that allusion by Michael Cohen to ongoing investigations by the Southern District of New York, some of the questions that he declined to answer, the specificity with which he described the role that other people who could be called to testify played in alleged criminal activity, you do start to see a somewhat clearer picture of events that could lead to an impeachment claim. I do think that it's important to note that the Democrats who are sort of most directly involved in the question of impeachment are still steering well clear of that. But even the party leaders who truly do not want that fight now or anytime soon will privately acknowledge that there are events that could transpire either from the Mueller investigation or the Southern District of New York or their own investigation that would make it very, very hard to tell the Democratic base and the Democratic rank and file in the House, no, we're not going to do that, period.
Tolu, let me ask you about the Republicans here, because a veteran of both Bush White Houses, Peter Wehner, writes this morning in the Times, quote, Republicans on the committee tried to destroy the credibility of Cohen's testimony, not because they believe that his testimony is false, he writes, but because they fear it's true. What do you think of that? And did they succeed in destroying the credibility of Michael Cohen?
That they seem laser focused on targeting Michael Cohen, calling him a liar, saying that he lied about a number of things in the past, that he had lied to Congress, and that really seemed to be their focus. But because Michael Cohen provided evidence and pointed to other potential witnesses, that strategy might not hold up in the face of that evidence. And if the Democrats decide to bring other witnesses, including Mr. Weisselberg, up to Congress, they will. The Republicans won't be able to tarnish him as a convicted felon or as a liar. This is someone who has been at President Trump's side for decades and is not charged with any specific crime. So that strategy may only take them so far, and I think they used it as much as they could yesterday. There were no questions really defending President Trump on the substance of the various allegations. They were really just trying to tear Michael Cohen down. But the fact that Michael Cohen provided evidence and provided names of other people who might be able to speak on some of his allegations makes it difficult to continue that strategy as Republicans try to tarnish his credibility. They may not be able to do the same for the other people involved.
One of those names, Alex Burns, is Alan Weisselberg, the Trump Organization's chief financial officer. Cohen referencing his knowledge, his role in alleged wrongdoing here. You have to imagine that he will be called up to the Hill and you will have more public testimony. The remarkable thing about this is that this is testimony that to this point only the special counsel has heard and now might be heard in public.
That's right, and that would, I think, Jim, be pretty substantially different from some of what we heard from Michael Cohen yesterday, in that, it was very vivid and powerful in many respects to hear the words directly from Michael Cohen's mouth in front of a House committee like that. I don't know that there are all that many Americans who are going to be stunned at some of the things that he said at this point. The American people have never heard from Alan Weisselberg. The American people have never heard from, virtually anybody else involved in the Trump Organization who has not been sort of explicitly put forward by the president and his allies at some point or another. So to the extent that Democrats in the House decide that they are going to take some of these figures in the president's world or witnesses in the various very quiet investigations and really make them public figures and put their words on the record for the American people to see for themselves, I think that could be more politically consequential maybe than what we saw yesterday.
Alex Burns, Tolu Olorunnipa from Hanoi, thanks very much.
All right, so ahead for us, the art of no deal. The president walks away from the North Korea talks. What's next?
Welcome back. President Trump is on his way back to Washington after his second summit with Kim Jong-un abruptly ended hours ago with no deal. An official telling us that Trump was certain he could get an agreement even though he was warned repeatedly in advance that Kim Jong-un would not budge on his demand that the U.S. lift all sanctions on North Korea immediately. Let's discuss now with the Democratic Senator Bob Menendez of New Jersey, also on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Senator, thanks for taking the time this morning.
Good to be with you, Jim.
So for a second time in a number of months, the president travels to the other side of the world to meet face-to-face with the North Korean leader, and he leaves without discernible progress on denuclearization. Were these talks, in your view, a failure?
Well, look, what we saw in Hanoi was amateur hour with nuclear weapons at stake and the limits of reality TV diplomacy. I had said well before the second summit that, in fact, the work of discipline, strategic preparation and diplomacy was critical if we were going to ultimately achieve any success here. And unfortunately, that proved to be true. There was a lack of the strategic building towards understanding what the absolute North Korea position would be and whether or not it was possible to find ways to move that. And what I worry about is that the president, by giving Kim Jong-un the international not only recognition but almost acceptance, from going from pariah to an accepted international leader, has squandered the leverage that we have. The question is China going to walk with us as well? Or are they going to continue down the path that China and Russia and others have done, which is begin to have less of sanctions enforcement and engage North Korea economically without us having achieved virtually anything?
Now, there was concern, even from within the administration, that the president might give up too much here, searching perhaps for a headline, for a win or a headline to distract from the Cohen testimony. He did not. He held the line. Do you give him credit for holding the line, in effect, and demanding more from Kim?
Well, look, without a full briefing, I'm not sure whether that was the best choice, but I do give him credit in this respect. If you're not going to get a good deal, then you do need to walk away. The problem is that you don't set yourself up